What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto gets revenge on the council? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. He was on guard duty, again. He seemed to never had the chance to do anything but guard duty since he came back. All of this was thanks to those all fart of the Elder Council. Of course, he will manage to become a Chunin, but it would only be partially due to his ninja skills. In fact, if he could still be a ninja was all thanks to Tsunade, who had used her prerogative as a Hokage. The council wanted him to be thrown in jail. It was not his fault if an organization of S-ranked criminal wanted the Kyuubi. They said that it was all a question of time before he betrayed them. Flashback. Sooner or later, they said snickering, he is a demon. Quote, they were perfectly aware that Naruto was in the room, but that did not bother them in any way. For them, he was nothing but an animal. His hands clenched into fists and his jaw stilled. He breathed in and out loudly. The older women turned around, glaring at Naruto. It had already done so much damage to the village, driving away the only Uchiha's heir with its malevolence, contaminating the youngest generation. See, the Sarutobi's heir had graduated the dead last of his year. Unbelievable. It's all that demon's fault. She ranted, pointing the red-painted crocked fingernail of her left pointer finger at Naruto. Her lips were set in a snarl, letting show the few yellowish teeth left in her mouth. Anyway, he can't be promoted Chunin without a trial, the old man said, pursing his lips. Tsunade glared at them, her eyebrows set in a frown, and Jiraiya sighed loudly. And what do you propose? Quote, a fight, the old man said. Tsunade raised an elegant thin grayish eyebrow, narrowing her eyes at the old couple in front of her. If he wins, he will be promoted. If he loses, we will do whatever we may see fit of him, the old woman said, her thin pink-shaped lips stretched in an evil smirk. Against who? Quote, the old man made a single hand seal and, soon after, a young black-haired guy entered the room. He was sporting an Anbu outfit. A smile obviously fake was adorning his face and his eyes were closed up, making him look like a fox. His face was nothing much to remember, not a single particular sign. Naruto glared. This guy has the perfect look of shinobi, he would easily disappear in the crowd. Nor handsome nor ugly, a face to forget. This is, Sai, the old woman said, a content look on her wrinkled face. He is a member of the special Anbu, the root. Quote, Tsunade's eyes widened. That's bad. Naruto narrowed his eyes, knowing perfectly well what it meant. He would have to give it his all if he wanted to stay alive. Flashback end. Since then they had made his life a living hell. He had not the authorization to go outside the village, so he could not take any mission apart from late-night guard duty. They had also put a veto on him being put in a Genin team, so he could not even do those boring D-ranked missions, and you have to be at least a Chunin to be a teacher in the academy. At least he could still have a pay. And a good pay at that. No one wanted the late-night duties, so they were well paid. His lips lifted up. The only downside that his match for his promotion was tomorrow in the early morning. He would just have to hope that nothing interesting would happen. Time break. 3 fucking hours walking back and forth in front of this stupid North Gate. No one used the North Gate anyway. Naruto kicked the dirt in front of him, mumbling some curses before turning his blue eyes to the sky. There was no moon that night, even thought the sky was beautiful. He sat down, putting his elbows on his knee and cupping his cheeks with his hands, his gaze wandering around the sky. Naruto let escape a sigh, the small puff of white smoke rapidly degrading in the cold early spring air. Suddenly something caught his attention. He turned his head a little bush to the right, frowning. He narrowed his blue eyes and sniffed the air. He closed his eyes for a quarter of a second as if trying to remember something. He stood up slowly, sliding his hands in his hidden pouch hanging on his belt behind his back, and silently took out kunai on which handle were tied explosive notes. He stepped carefully on his right, his eyes narrowed as if he was trying to see something in the dark. A small ruffle coming out from the bush at the edge of the forest. He threw the kunai along an imaginary line. Then he jumped back, landing back in front of the gate. Just hope it's not some raccoon. Naruto thought, not wanted, turned himself into a fool. He readied himself for attack, his knee bent low, his left hands a little under his chin protecting his heart and his right ones up to his face gripping firmly at kunai. His blue eyes glowing ethereally in the darkness, seemed unfocused. His breathing was slow and steady and small puffs of white smoke were coming out of his mouth. He closed his eyes a second and reopened them, his eyes focused on the small bush in front of him. Then two of his shadow clones come out of the bush holding on a body. It looked human, a prettily beat-up human at that. Naruto took a step up to his clones as they dragged the body up the middle of the clearing. His movements were weary, as he finally arrived in front of the body. His heart was beating faster and faster as his blue eyes encountered the pale skin which the dark-colored shirt barely hid anymore. His eyes scanned slowly up the body. His breathing stopped for a quarter of a second, his eyes widened as he recognized the face of the person in front of him. It was covered with bruises and blood, but still he could recognize this face anywhere. He had seen it in every and each of his nightmares for 3 years. He brushed back the locks of black hair from the eyes of the not-so-unknown person. "Sasuke," he breathed, his voice not above a whisper, as if he was afraid that if he spoke louder the young boy would disappear. Naruto breathed shakily in and out, looking down at the young Uchiha heir. His clothes were torn in numerous places and scratches and bruises covered his legs, arms and face. One could easily tell that the Uchiha had been running. His left ankle was bent in an odd angle and the skin was in horrible blue-purple yellowish colors. Naruto winced at the thought of Sasuke running with his ankle in this state. He continued his examination and saw a burn going on from the top of his left shoulder to his elbow. He must have been running away seeing how the burn were dispatched. His eyes wandered down his hands, his eyes widened in disgust. 3 of Sasuke's left hand fingers had been broken. Naruto delicately took them in his hands. He carefully studied them. The 4th finger is infected, it will have to be cut down, he thought, biting his lips slightly. Contrary to everyone's expectation, Naruto had learned medic jutsu, and he was good at it. Not that he needed it, but he preferred to heal his wounds without the Kyuubi's help, plus he could now help other. He remembered the quarrel he had had with Jiraiya about that. Flashback. Jiraiya frowned. What the hell could Tsunade have sent to his student? Earlier that day they had received a box from Tsunade with 2 letters. One of the letter was for Jiraiya, the other and the box were for Naruto. Naruto had opened the letter, read it, then he had taken the box and skipped away, a mischievous grin on his face. Since then Jiraiya had not seen the little kitsune. That would be 2 hours ago. Not that he was worried. No, he was not worried at all. That meant he could happily enjoy his daily peeping on the women part of the onsen, too. But still, what could there have been in this box? Jiraiya glared at the fence in front of him. Curiosity kills the cat. Jiraiya took off, glancing longingly one last time at small peeping hole in the fence of the onsen. He took a deep breath and turned his head sharply away. That brat. I'm getting way too soft, he muttered. He had then searched everywhere in town, in the forest bordering the small civilian village they were in. 8 hours watching everywhere, asking everyone consisting of every good-looking woman over 15 and less than 40, running away from enraged boyfriends, husbands. The sun was already setting when a battered and tired Jiraiya decided to stop his search for the day and return to the small inn's room they had booked in together with Naruto. We had to spare our money, the young boy had said when he had taken his frog purse away from Jiraiya's greedy hands. Jiraiya pushed the door of the room open, his eyes fixed on his feet. All he wanted now was sake and beautiful women massaging his feet. Oi Ero Senin, a voice he immediately identified as Naruto's, called. Where have you been? Quote. Jiraiya looked up incredulously. Where have I been? Where have I been? I've been looking for you all day. Quote. Naruto stared at him, his wide innocent blue eyes looking at him questionably. But I've been here all day, he said while pouting. Don't have to yell at me if you're not able to find me, because you obviously did not look for me. Quote. Jiraiya loudly breathed in and out, not wanted to blow off the young impertinent brat. And may I ask, what were you doing? Jiraiya asked, barely concealing his anger. None of your business, Naruto answered, bouncing happily up and down on his bed. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes at the bouncing orange-clad boy, gritting his teeth. He would know what Naruto had done all day, or he was not the most perverted and powerful Sannin, 3, anymore. Naruto, he growled. What were you doing? Quote. Naruto continued to jump on the bed, ignoring totally the Sennin. Jiraiya bent down, taking the sheet and tugging it violently. Naruto soon found himself meeting the floor face first. Oi Ero Baka, what did you do that for? Naruto whined while massaging the tips of his nose, his lips set in a pout. Now kid, did you work on the Sweden move I showed you? Jiraiya asked, eyes glaring daggers at the chibi blonde in front of him. Knowing perfectly well that if Naruto had been here all day, he could not have work on his Sweden. Naruto's eyes widened for a second, then he bent down his head in shame, his eyes wandering everywhere in the room avoiding any contact with Jiraiya. No, Naruto said, his voice not above a whisper. He closed his eyes waiting for the lecture Jiraiya was going to give him. So, what pray tell were you doing, brat? Jiraiya asked harshly. Naruto chuckled while massaging the nape of his neck, head slightly bow, his blue eyes fixed on the floor. Hey, nothing important, he whispered. Jiraiya narrowed his eye at the young boy in front of him. Nothing? So what is that? He said holding a scroll in his hands. Hey! Naruto cried trying to take back the scroll, it's mine. Quote. Jiraiya skillfully avoided Naruto as the latter hung on his back trying desperately to tear the scroll away from the pervert hands. Jiraiya carefully opened the scroll discovering the kanji and hiragana scribbled on the paper. He immediately recognized his female teammate's handwriting. He slowly read the scroll, narrowing his eyes to read the tinny furigana, 4, on the right side of the kanji. He frowned. Medical techniques? Jiraiya asked himself. Why would Tsunade send this to him? Taking advantage of the Sennin distraction, Naruto snatched back the scroll running back in his part of the room. Why you brat? Jiraiya swore. Jiraiya sighed loudly before asking. Why on earth is Tsunade sending you medical jutsu? Quote. Jiraiya narrowed his black eyes at Naruto who just stood up, the scroll kept in a death grip near his chest, his back half turned to Jiraiya, glaring daggers at the 50-year-old. Because. Naruto answered childishly. Jiraiya closed his eyes pitching the bridge of his nose sighing loudly. Why? Jiraiya asked again, his black eyes narrowed at Naruto, clearly showing that he wanted an answer. Naruto bit his lips. I've asked her, he muttered not looking at Jiraiya. Jiraiya's eyes widened. Why? Jiraiya asked incredulously. Because. Naruto answered lamely, bowing his head down in shame. Jiraiya frowned looking at Naruto whose eyes darting away from the insistent look of the Sennin. Suddenly, Jiraiya's eyes widened in realization, his face paling considerably. If it's about what happened last time, Jiraiya began. No, Naruto yelled shaking his head from right to left in denial. It's not about last time. It has absolutely nothing to do about last time. Quote. Jiraiya looked sadly at his charge. It's not about last time. Naruto yelled glaring at Jiraiya. Jiraiya could clearly see the guilt shining through those clear blue eyes. Yes, Naruto really wears his soul in his eyes. Jiraiya thought smiling sadly. So why are you learning them? Jiraiya asked. Naruto began not knowing what to say. To become the best Hokage ever. Quote. Jiraiya smiled, that was a perfect little white lie. Really the most surprising ninja. Jiraiya muttered before walking back to his bed and collapsing on it. Flashback end. Naruto concentrated his chakra in his hands and pushed it into Sasuke's body, forcing the gasp on Sasuke's leg to close up. He sighed as he began to inspect Sasuke's body, trying to heal the most life-threatening wounds. Now he had to warn the authority. Naruto called out 2 clones. Go warn the Hokage. I've a wounded ninja at the north gate. He whispered quickly at his clones. He turned back to Sasuke. He tore the sleeve of his black jacket, he folded it, then taking out his gourd, he damped it with water and began to wipe clean Sasuke's face. Time break. The Hokage glanced a last time behind her at the Uchiha now sleeping peacefully in his bed. She could not help but feel disgusted to have to help the little mongrel who had tried to kill her brother figure. She closed the door and turned to the Anbu next to her. No one is allowed here unless they have my permission. Not even the council's members. She snarled narrowing her brown eyes at the 2 Anbu. Did I make myself clear? Quote. The 2 Anbu nodded in understanding, avoiding to look at the fuming Hokage. Tsunade rapidly walked down the hall, her Hokage's robe gracefully flying behind her. She would have to call an extraordinary council meeting. She had the bad feeling that the civil council would once again play one of its dirty tricks. If only Konoha laws did not stated that, even in some of the shinobi's matters, the 2 councils had to give their accord. She sighed loudly as she opened the door of her office. She entered, looking around the room. Her brown eyes fell on the blonde pacing back and forth in front of her desk. "Hey, Tsunade Baba." 5. Naruto said, not bothering to hide the anxiousness in his voice. "How is he?" Quote. She was absolutely not ready for this. "He is fine now," Tsunade said while walking up to her armchair. She sat down, then took out a bottle of sake and a small cup. "What will you do?" Naruto asked quietly, looking fiercely at Tsunade. Tsunade poured herself a cup of sake. She played with her cup, watching the play of colors as the sake turned into the cup. "He will have a trial, and be sentenced accordingly to his crime," Tsunade answered, not looking at Naruto. Colors drained from Naruto's face. He knew what it meant. He had studied Konoha laws. Treachery was punished by death. More exactly, the culprit would be beheaded in front of his peers. Naruto shakily breathed in and out. His eyes were avoiding Tsunade's and were fixed on the corner of the desk as he racked through his head to find a way to save the one he foolishly thought as his best friend. "It was not his fault," Naruto declared. Tsunade raised her head, narrowing her eyes at Naruto, an expression of disbelief crossing her face. "It was not his fault," Naruto said, slapping his left hand on the desk. "He was under Orochimaru's influence." Quote. Tsunade shocked her head in disbelief. Naruto was definitely too kind-hearted to be a shinobi. Such forgetfulness were no good when one worked as a shinobi. She just wanted to tell him to stop dreaming, that Sasuke had tried to kill him on his own free will, that he would surely try again. But she bit back the words. Now was not the moment. Naruto did not need this, not now anyway. "Do not worry for the Uchiha for the moment, Naruto. You had a fight to prepare," Tsunade said in a cold voice. Naruto glared at her for a second, then he remarked the worried in her eyes and the wrinkles forming on her forehead. He sighed. "Well, I may see you at the arena, Ba-chan." 6. Naruto answered, bowing in mock respect as he exited the office. Hearing the door closing, Tsunade walked up her window, looking down at the sleeping village in front of her. "Why do you worry so much about him?" she asked herself out loud. "He tried to kill you. But still, why do you try so much, Naruto?" Quote. She turned around, calling upon the Chunin who was on permanence's duty. She then walked up to her desk and scribbled words on a piece of paper. She gave it to the Chunin, ordering him to take it to all council members. Time break. Time was up. He had to fight now. He was tired, he could not sleep because he worried too much about the Uchiha heir's fate. But he knew he could not afford to be worried about his arrogant friend anymore. His future as a shinobi, his freedom were challenged. He checked himself a last time, making sure he had his weapons on him. He securely warped his sword on his left side. He had not worked on his Kenjutsu 7 for a good half a year, and maybe he was a little rusty. But he was pretty confident that his skill would be enough for what he had in mind. He put on his fingerless gloves, verifying if the poison claws that he had hidden in could correctly get out. Sure, he could always use the ones his demonic appearance provided him with, but then they were not poisoned, and he would try not to use the Kyuubi just in case that would turn against him. He readjusted his Hite 8 on his head, slowly breathed in and out, and stepped inside the arena. The arena had been rebuilt after the sound and sand attack, the very same than before. Naruto was nervous, but he could not afford to show this to his opponent, so he decided to simply put one of his grin on his face and skipped seemingly excitingly inside the arena and stopped in front of Sai, who was waiting in the middle of the fighting area. "Ready to have your ass kicked?" Naruto proclaimed loudly, grinning ear to ear. "Whenever you want, Les," Sai answered in a monotone voice. "You?" Naruto growled, narrowing his eyes at the dark-haired boy in front of him. But before he could say more, Tsunade cleared loudly her throat. Naruto turned around, his eyes fixed on the fifth. "Fine, since the two warriors are here. Let's begin," she yelled before puffing away, joining Jiraiya and the council's members. Naruto did not bulge, his blue eyes narrowed at his opponent. He slowly breathed in and out, calming his raging nerves. He could not afford to be the first to attack. This Sai person had surely had access to his files and knew him, or at least his 12-year-old self, good enough to take the advantage. And the stalker had followed him all week, scrutinizing every and each of his movement. Plus, he really did not wanted to give his skills away. Naruto sighed, he would have rather not fought. Sai, on the other hand, was looking at him quizzically. his head slightly bent on his right side and his eyes shining with curiosity. He slowly raised his hand. Naruto immediately tensed, putting his right hand on his sword handle and his left holding the scabbard. Sai slowly opened his mouth. "I abandon," he said, his voice echoing in the nearly empty stadium. Naruto could only watch him speechless. He could not understand his opponent's decision. "What?" Hotaru roared as she walked as quickly as her old short legs would carry her down the narrowed stair leading to the fighting area. She stopped in front of Sai, stretching herself trying to tower him, her tinny eyes narrowing at the young shinobi. "What does that mean?" she spatted, clearly showing her displeasure. "You've asked me to evaluate him. I've done that, and I found him fitting to the title of Junin," he said, smirking at the old decadent woman in front of him. Hotaru's face deformed in anger, her hand was lifted ready to slap the impertinent brat. "You never said that we actually had to fight," Sai added with a cheerful voice. This was the last straw. Hotaru gathered her strength and threw her hand ready to slap the mongrel. But her hand never made it to the face of the young Anbu. She turned around ready to blow at whoever had the impudence to grip her wrist. Her eyes widened as they land on Yamanaka Inoshi. "No, no, no. Hotaru-sama, no need to resort to violence," Nara Shikaku said in his quiet, deep voice while slightly moving his head from left to right. "This is done. Uzumaki Naruto received here and now the title of Junin of the village hidden in the leaf. You shall protect it with all your might," Tsunade said quickly before looming over Naruto's still form. Naruto looked around, still not believing what had just happened. He had prepared for a week for this fight, and there was no match. He just stood there, eyes wide and his mouth slightly opened. He did not know if he should be happy or not, but he certainly felt disappointed. He had wanted to fight, anticipated this fight, and then nothing? "Can't do," Naruto muttered. Tsunade pushed herself away from Naruto's body, looking at him with dread. She simply knew that Naruto would never accept this so easily. "This can't do," Naruto said loudly, while glaring daggers at Sai. "What less? Want to fight?" Sai taunted. Naruto narrowed his blue eyes at the smiling Anbu in front of him. "I'm not less. You, mummer," Naruto yelled angrily, pointing at Sai. "Is that an insult, less?" Sai said, his smirk widening. "Arg!" Naruto yelled while rubbing his hair with his hands. Tsunade smiled at Naruto's antics. She really loved the brat. Naruto suddenly gripped Sai's hand and without letting time for Sai to realize what was happening, he dragged him outside the arena. "It's time to celebrate," Naruto yelled while dragging the shocked Anbu behind him. "Let's go to ramen. It's the Hokage treat." Quote, "But sometimes she really felt old." Time break. Sasuke opened his eyes to a white blur. He blinked his eyes several times before his vision came back to normal. He tried to move and found that apart from his all-body aching, he was restrained by thick leather manacles on his ankles and wrists. He tried to use his chakra to get rid of the annoying handcuffs that were anchoring him to his bed to no avail. He sighed. At least he was alive. But where? Finally awake, Uchiha-san, an unfamiliar voice said. He turned his head to the left, trying to ignore the pain throwing through his head, and saw a black-haired woman worrying herself at his side. He narrowed his eyes, watching suspiciously every and each of the young woman's movement. From what he could see of her graceful and accurate motions, she was a ninja, surely a medic since he was probably in a hospital. Where? Sasuke said in a rasping voice. The young woman immediately approached a glass of water, tipped it up, making the liquid glide down his sore throat. Sasuke couched a little when the water went through his breathing tube. The medic quickly withdrew the glass. Sasuke breathed in and out. "Where am I?" he asked again. The medic Nin returned to tend his wounds, not even glancing at him before answering. "Hokage's special medical wards," she answered quietly. "Kei Konoha?" Sasuke shocked out. "The Hokage should arrive soon. I have already warned her of your awakening," the short-haired woman said as she tugged the sheets. Just at this moment, the doors burst open. A tall blonde big woman entered the room, her white Hokage's robe flying elegantly being her. "Uchiha Sasuke," she said in a dark low voice, hatred dripping off of each words. "You are under arrest. You will not leave this room nor have any contact with the exterior until your trial, which should take place as soon as I see fit." Quote, Sasuke resisted the urge to roll his eyes. How the hell did she wanted him to wander outside, when he was attached to a bed with chakra-eating straps. Women are all stupid or shallow or both. The Uchiha heir thought as he turned his eyes up to stare at the ceiling. He growled as he saw the dark-haired woman approaching, a syringe in her hands. She pulled it a little and drops of the transparent liquid in the squirt trickled down the needle. She seized Sasuke's arms, pulling it rather violently. Her left hand gripped firmly his forearm and she pushed the needle into the vein inside his elbow. He stared at the transparent liquid entering his bloodstream. He tried to disengage his arm from the grip of the medic, but found himself weaker and weaker. His eyelids slowly dropped. He tried to fight back the effect of the drugs to no avail. How he hated not being in control. Naruto was nervous, extremely nervous. He tugged down his green Junin vest down for the nth times. He was quite uncomfortable with the vest on. But he had to wear it. Tsunade had summoned him to her office to assign him his very first mission as a Junin. Calm down, Naruto. It's not like you to be nervous. You are loud and obvious but not nervous. Naruto breathed in loudly, he bit his lips slightly. And suddenly smiled. Yosh, here we go. Naruto cheered himself up, pushing Tsunade's office door open. Yo Ba-chan, he yelled as loudly as he could. Tsunade simply looked up at the loud boy, shocking her head slightly. You look old, Ba-chan. Naruto remarked in a conversational tone of voice while sitting on the armchair in front of Tsunade's messy desk. I've stayed up all night, Tsunade answered darkly. Sasuke. Naruto muttered slowly as if afraid of the name. Do not worry about this brat. I'll see that his life will be spared, Tsunade said. At the tone of her voice, Naruto could clearly feel that she did not want to go further in the subject, so Naruto just smiled. It's fine. Naruto said, closing his eyes, titling his head slightly to the right. He looked peaceful, like a heavy weight was taken off his shoulder. A sad smile graced Tsunade's face. Naruto was too forgiven. Tsunade took a deep breath. Back to business, she muttered. She dusted her robes, smoothing the wrinkles. She sent her hair back so they would not hinder her and put her to hands flat on her desk. As a freshly appointed Junin, you'll have to take a genin team. Tsunade began, a small smirk adorning her face. Naruto raised an eyebrow, surprised that the Elder Council would authorize this. That's a tradition. Tsunade continued as if she was answering Naruto's unasked question. Naruto put his elbows on the desk, his chin resting on his folded fingers. He grinned. So he could be a normal Junin, with a genin team and all. True, he would not be able to do awesome A or S class missions. He would save the princess of the bad loan sharks and all the things that he had dreamed of when he was younger, but he had done a lot of missions with Jiraiya. Plus all the Hokage had genin team, apart from Tsunade, but she was the exception confirming the rule. So, who are the lucky ones? Naruto asked with the biggest grin he could muster. Tsunade smiled. She would not have thought it would be so easy to convince him. She was sure he would scream and yell at the unfairness of the job. But there he was, all smile, ready to accept the mission, knowing that it would mean D-ranked missions and maybe some C-ranked missions. She smiled, the most unpredictable ninja she had ever met. She threw a scroll at Naruto. This are the informations on the 3 genin you may take in your team. Be at the academy at 1300. Room 204. Quote. She smiled, watching Naruto happily skipping out of her office while whistling. Time break. Naruto was sitting on the branch of the cherry tree in front of the windows giving on the room 204. He looked at the brown-haired Chunin speaking strictly at a bunch of super excited children showing their hite proudly at each other. He smiled a little, remembering of his own graduation day. His smile flattered as he remembered that he had no one to show his hite off. But a sudden scream called him back to reality. He turned his gaze to the source of the scream. A young brown short-hair boy was screaming at a black-hair guy. They were bickering. It was rather a one-sided discussion on the brown-hair boy part. A girl whose light brown hair were cut short in a shag and maintained out of her eyes by several multicolored small bars, was trying to calm the brown-hair boy down. Naruto observed the trio interacting. The girl was a bit bossy but definitely less violent than Sakura had been. She preferred to use words over brutal force. She was gifted with words and opposite her movements were awkward and hesitating. Simply put, she was a brain. But she was trying. He could easily see it by the small cuts and bruises adorning her forearms and lingering on her face clumsily hidden behind a thin layer of makeup. the callosities on her hands, fingers and shins, the burns on her legs badly hidden under her unsymmetrical black shorts and the ones on her arms that she tried to hidden under the long sleeves of her dark green shirt, and the blisters on her ankles and toes that she covered with blue or pink dressings. Her chakra was barely noticeable, but that was not because she was hiding it, rather that her chakra was very low, about Sakura's own when she was still a genin. But she had good control over it. Maybe she had trained on this. The brown hair boy was quite boisterous. His loud voice was echoing in the all class. He was restlessly playing with his hands, twisting, folded and unfolded his fingers. Every once in a while, he bit down one of his fingernails and immediately putting it away, looking down guiltily. His boisterousness was surely a way to hide his doubtful self. His movements were inaccurate and disorganized. He had a lot of strength, but he did not know how to use it. His back was slightly bent forwards, he seemed unable to stand straight. Maybe he was wearing weight. He often rubbed his eyes to chase the sleepiness away, and his left hand went to massage his lower back every so often. He was surely victim of an unadapted self-training. His chakra was unrested, spiking ever so slightly, wasted away as he could not control it correctly. Just like he, Naruto, had been. He turned his eyes to the last member of the trio. The shortest one. He had messy short hair sticking out everywhere. The mediator, the calmest of the three. He seemed to hide most of his body behind dark-colored clothes and bandages. His eyes were following each movements of his two friends, not leaving them a second as they chatted happily. He was smiling, but Naruto could say it was fake. After all, he was the self-proclaimed king of fake smiles. Every once in a while, he would wince at the abrupt movements of his friends, closing his eyes tightly like he was trying to avoid to be hit. He also nibbled his lower lip every time he wanted to say something. He had good reflex and was pretty quick. Naruto could tell as he saw the future ninja dodged the crumpled paper that was thrown across the class. His controlled chakra was not as good as the girls, but it was good enough for a genin wannabe. He had an average chakra reserved that he tried clumsily to hide. But unfortunately, every once in a while, he would let escape a spike of chakra, disrupted the flow of the others. Naruto's eyes wandered on the Chunin making the class. He was quite disappointed that it was not Iruka. He would have been so happy to speak with the well-mannered ninja. But he could not help but be happy when he saw this person smiling at his young pupils. He has not changed, Naruto thought to himself. Still the same chubby Choji. He watched Choji's smile on his face as Choji opened his eyes widen in a very intimidating way at the young boy that had collided with his massive body. The young boy cowered in fear as he saw Choji's big chubby right hand approaching him, small tears forming on the edge of his closed eyes. But the hit never came. In fact, Choji just put his wide hand on the blond boy's head and ruffled his hair, a content smile on his face. The young boy began to laugh at his own foolishness, and soon the all class was laughing with him as Choji began to make funny faces. Naruto's smile widened. It seemed like Choji had found his place. The place where no one judged him. Naruto looked down at his hands. Was Konoha really his place? He shocked his head, dismissing the thought. It was no time for self-pitying. He turned his gaze back to the classroom to see the now stern-looking Choji lecturing his class. Surely he was doing them the same speech that Iruka had made them when they had graduated. Soon, there was cries of joy and screams of despair as Choji announced the team in a low dictating voice. No change. He finished glaring at the girls and boys that were frankly raising their hands. They quickly hid their hands under their desk, muttering about the unfairness of their not so favorite anymore sensei. You must be all in this class at 1300 for your Junin sensei to take you up. Now you can go, Choji added, smiling. The children got up and roared in content, running to the door as if they had the devil on their heels. Choji sighed as he saw his first promotion get out of his class. He turned his eyes to the cherry tree, his gentle brown eyes meeting with Naruto's own blue sky ones. He smiled, gesturing him to get in the classroom. Naruto got up from his sitting position and jumped through the opened window inside the classroom. So I heard you were promoted to Junin? Congratulations. Choji began in a cheerful voice. Yep. And you made it to Chunin? Naruto answered, a mischievous smile on his face. Yep. I'm quite happy like that. Choji continued while walking out of the classroom. Not going to take the exam to become a Junin then? Naruto asked, following Choji as they walked down the hall of the academy. Choji simply shocked his head in answer. So you are going to take a genin team? Choji asked, eyeing his friend. Naruto only grinned, skipping happily ahead. Who? Choji asked while rolling his eyes at Naruto's childish behavior. Akiko, Shuichi and Kei, Naruto answered. Choji stopped walking, staring eyes wide at Naruto. Those three? They will be a handful. Quote, if they pass my tests, Naruto said in a serious voice, stopping a few steps before the huge faded orange doors of the main entrance of the academy. I've no worries they will pass it. They are the best of their promotion. Very hard-working. Choji explained with a proud smile. They may pass it. Or maybe not. Who knows? Naruto answered childishly while turning his head back to his friend, his eyes glittering with a cunning light. Time break. It had been 2 hours, 2 very long and boring hours, and they were still waiting for their sensei. All the others had gone with their Junin instructor, and even Choji-sensei had to go. Apparently he had to make papers work and prepared for his new class. Akiko stared at the clock, looking the longer arm of the clock slowly moving forward, signaling that another minute had gone by. 15:01. 2 hours and a minute of waiting. She sighed, turning her eyes to her teammates and best friends. She was quite lucky in this aspect. She had been put up together with the two persons she liked the most in the class. True, she was friendly with everyone in the class, apart from that viper of Taeko. But she did not think she could have put up with most of them in a team. At least those two knew her a little better than the others, and did not expect anything from her except from being herself. She smiled as she heard Shuichi grumbled in his sleep. His head was resting on his crossed arms. On the desk, a small trail of drool was running down his chin, glittering under the sunlight. Her eyes turned up to Kei. He was reading a book and, every 2 minutes or so, he would glance at the clock, then at her, and finally at Shuichi before returning to his book. She bent down, a little curious to know what her friend was reading, but she could not decipher the title. She sighed. It was surely a medical book. It was a well-known fact that Kei wanted to become a medic. She had never had the nerves to ask why, but she was sure it had to do with his mother. Akiko? Kei asked quietly. Akiko turned her eyes to Kei. What? Quote, you should wake him. He would not want to make a bad impression on the teacher, Kei whispered. Akiko smiled gently at Kei. Even thought the two of them were always bickering about everything. Kei always helped Shuichi. Maybe it was because the two of them lack of a parent? Akiko shocked her head. Now was not the time to analyze her teammates' relationship. She walked up to Shuichi as silently as she could, afraid that if she made noise she would break the calm atmosphere. She seized Shuichi's shoulder and shocked him a little. Shu? Hey, wake up, marmot. Quote, Shuichi answered, slowly opening his eyes. His vision was blurry and all he could see was a blurry green mass with a tuft of brown on the top. He blinked a few times until he could finally see the expecting face of Akiko. Akiko? Is the teacher here yet? Quote, no, Akiko answered. Hearing the answer, Shuichi put his head back on his arms, planning to continue his nap. But that is no reason to go back to sleep, Akiko said, clearly unnerved by her teammates' behavior. Boot. Akiko chaan. Shuichi whined. Akiko frowned at Shuichi, her light olive-colored eyes flaming, clearly showing him that another word would cost him dearly. Shuichi gulped and looked away from the intense gaze of his female teammate. A quarter of hours later, their Junin had still not shown up. Shuichi was nervously tapping his fingers again his wooden desk and hitting his heels again the wooden floor of the classroom, creating a hubbub, making all the tables shook in a disorderedness rhythm. Kei turned his dark green eyes to Shuichi, his expression clearly showing his displeasure. Can you stop that? I'm trying to read, Kei said quietly. His voice could be barely heard, but his blazing eyes were saying it all. Shuichi turned puppy eyes to Kei, asking silently for leniency. Kei's eyes just hardened, and Shuichi stopped his nervous movements altogether. What is he doing? Shuichi whined, pushing his chair back loudly. He walked up to the front of the room and began to walk back and forth. Kei glared at Shuichi as Shuichi grumbled under his breath incomprehensible things. Can't you shut up? Akiko asked. I'm trying to concentrate. Quote, Shuichi turned around to glare at Akiko, who was sitting at the very last row of the class fixing an imaginary point on the blackboard, not even looking at Shuichi. Shuichi frowned, then sticked out his tongue at her and resumed his spacing. "Can't you stop spacing and stay still for a second?" Akiko asked while walking up to Shuichi. They were now face to face, their nose so close that they were nearly touching. Shuichi was slightly taller than Akiko, but not too much. The difference was barely noticeable, a half-inch maybe shorter. "I was calm and silent before you woke me up," Shuichi yelled, glaring daggers at the young teenage girl in front of him. She glared back at him, trying to tower him, getting up on her toes, stretching herself as much as she could. She set her lips in a frown and put her left hand on her hip and used her right to push harshly Shuichi away from her. She put her right pointer finger on his heart. "You're the stupidest, loudest person in the world," and she yelled, pushing rudely her finger on Shuichi's chest, but she was interrupted by a loud noise. She turned around to see that Kei had gotten up from his chair. His eyes were closed, as was his book. "Our teacher is here," Kei said simply, looking past them at the person standing at the door. Akiko and Shuichi sprang around to see their new teacher in the frame of the classroom door. There was standing a teenager about 3 years older than them, a little on the small side. He surely had not reached his puberty spurt yet. He wore a black military pants with a lot of pockets, and his ankles were covered with dark gray bandages. His black short sleeves shirt was partially covered by his open dark green Junin vest. They could see hanging around his neck a 3 blue pearls necklace and a black iPod. The height collar of the vest was hiding a part of his chin. His face was still filled with some baby fat. His slightly chubby cheeks adorned of 3 whiskers-like marks that made him look like a fox. His sky-blue eyes were shining with curiosity and life. He had shocking blonde hair sticking out everywhere in a rather unique style. One could believe he had tried to cut his hair by himself and lamely failed. He walked past them, not even glancing at them. He lifted one of his long large hands up to his ear, his long fingers fishing his earphone. He left it fell done. "You failed my first test," he said in a singing voice. What? Akiko asked, surprised. She had never ever failed a test in her life, apart from the test of Rorschach 1. She stared at her teacher as the latter sat himself on the teacher's desk in Indian style. "So tell me a little about yourself. Nicknames, likes, dislikes, your ambition for the future," their teacher asked in a bored voice. Shuichi simply stared at him, still standing where he was a few feet away from the desk near the widow. Kei, as for himself, sat on his previous sit, his book opened, completely uninterested by what his professor could be saying. Akiko was looking at him, eyes widened, her mouth slightly opened at such laziness. This person was mean to be their sensei. He was barely older than them. He looked like a punk, with his dyed hair, because, Akiko reasoned, no one could have naturally such a flashy and loud color of hair. She glared at him, sitting just in front of him, defying him. "Go first, Sen-say," she declared defiantly, raising her 2 brows daringly. A smile formed on the teenager's face in front of her. "Loudmouth, stupid, and my personal favorites monster are some of the nicknames people gives me. I like ramen. I dislike the 3 minutes of wait to prepared ramen. My dream for the future. Ask whoever you want, they will know. I'm quite sure I'm forgetting something there. Oh, and my name. Nah. It's of no importance to you for the moment," Naruto said in a bored voice, looking straight into Akiko's eyes. "So now it's your turn, Akiko." Quote. Akiko snarled. She had learned nothing of her teacher, not even his name. And those nicknames, they did not mean anything at all. It was very easy to obtain the title of loudmouth, and stupid was the #1 insult used by the girls to degrade guys. As for monster, nearly every villagers called shinobi like that, not in the open, but under their breath, when they thought no one could heard. She narrowed her eyes at her teacher, clearly displeased. "I've no nickname that I know of. I like reading and learning new things. I dislike arrogant people that think that they are better than others." She smirked at the last statement, looking straight at her teacher. Her smirk faltered a little when she saw that her last reflection did not have the impact she had hoped for. "And I want to become the best taijutsu specialized kunoichi." She finished, glaring at Naruto that seemed to have not heard a word of what she had said. "You," Naruto said, pointing his chin at Shuichi. When Shuichi did not answer, Akiko walked up to him and hit Shuichi on his head. Shuichi looked around frankly, not knowing what was happening. He was daydreaming, a nice daydream. He pouted, turning sad puppy eyes at Akiko. Why would you do that? He seemed to ask. She glanced at him meaningfully. Shuichi laughed nervously. Hey, I'm Shu. I like training. My mother, my friends, I dislike people that think they are better than me. It's all. Shuichi said, hesitating, his eyes turning up as he searched his brain for informations. Naruto nodded and turned to Kei. I'm Kei. No special nickname. Like reading. Dislike being disturbed while reading. I am going to become a medic. Kei answered, his voice not above a whisper, eyes not leaving his book. Naruto smirked at his new students. They were interesting, he could not wait to see how they would react to his little test. Okay, team. Tomorrow, 0600, Training Ground 13. Survival training test. Naruto said simply before walking out of the classroom. Hey, wait, what survival training? Shuichi yelled at his teacher running up to him. The training that has a failure rate of 1/3. Naruto answered, not turning back. What? Shuichi and Akiko yelled at the same time. That can't be. Quote. Kei loudly closed his book and walked out of the classroom. See you tomorrow. Kei said before exiting the room, cutting through his teammates yelling. They immediately stopped screaming, looking eyes wide at the black-haired boy, walking through the door calmly, as if he had not heard what their sensei had just said. Arg Kei, wait for me, Shuichi yelled, running after his friend. Akiko watched them walking away, a little smile forming on her dry, faded pink lips. Wait for me, she asked, running happily up to them. Time break. Naruto was surprised to find Choji speaking to Shikamaru, who was leaning against the cherry tree at the back entrance of the academy. He walked past them, not wanting to interrupt their talk. Hey Naruto, wait up, where are you going? Choji asked, running after him. Naruto turned around stunned. Were they waiting for him? How troublesome. Shikamaru replied, walking up to Naruto. We were waiting for you. Quote. Naruto looked at them questionably, his eyes wide opened, his lips ticking up ever so slightly. We thought that we would celebrate your coming back home and promotion all in one go. A new dark low voice said. Naruto span around to see Neji standing a few feet away from him. Hinata flanked at his side. Kiba and Akamaru were there too, standing proudly a few feet away from the Hyuga. Naruto blinked a few times. They were here for him? Really? A grin spread on his face, he could not be happier. He had friends that care enough for him to be celebrate with him. Let's go. He grinned happily at them, walking ahead of his friends. A few moments later, the small group was at the ramen bar. So what were you up to, Naruto? Neji asked. You were here for 4 weeks. Shikamaru began. 4 weeks? And you did not come to see us? Kiba asked, bewildered. I was busy. Naruto answered, not wanted to elaborate. When did you become a Junin? Neji cut in before Kiba could ask anything else. Naruto laughed nervously, looking away. He scratched his right temple with pointer finger. When did you become a Junin, Neji? Quote. Neji narrowed at Naruto. He had known him more subtle. Last year exam. Quote. So you're taking a team this year? Naruto asked, already knowing the answer. If they pass the test. Neji answered, not liking his friend's quietness. The Naruto he knew would have came see them first thing, and then bragged about his training with the legendary Toad Sannin. He closed his eyes, listening to the babble of his friends. Naruto's voice rang in his ear, loud and slightly annoying, like it had been 3 years ago. Maybe a little deeper, more mature. He frowned, there was something else, something hidden. Neji concentrated harder, trying to decipher what was hidden under Naruto's cheerful tone. Neji's eyes widened. Sadness? He looked carefully at Naruto, watching him making exaggerated movement to describe his battle, adding loud comments about how he kicked ass. But his eyes were not cheerful, well hidden in them he could see the sadness lingering. Was it always there? Neji turned to the other to see if anyone had noticed. His eyes met for a slip of a second with Shikamaru's, and he knew that the genius had also remarked. Neji tilted his head to the left, resting his cheek on his left hand. He looked at the scene unfolded in front of him. Watching Naruto chatted seemingly happily with his friends. But did they know him at all? Now he could see it, the tics Naruto had. The way his lips would slightly pinch as he forced himself to smile. How his loud voice would crack from time to time when he spoke about certain events. The way his eyes darted to the exit each time a new client entered the stand, the weary look he sported each time a patron turned to glare at him. The nervous movements of his hands to his eyes to swimmingly get rid of dust in his eyes but in reality weeping his tears before they fell. Neji was stunned. There was so much about his friend that he did not know. But no matter how long it would take, he would find a way to help Naruto, like Naruto had helped him. She had arrived a little early. 10 minutes early, but she hated lateness. She would rather be early than being a minute late. A gust of cold wind made her shivered, and she quickly hid her fingerless gloves-covered hands in the pockets of her dark blue vest. She looked around her and spotted Kay sporting his usual black outfit, with his arms and hands covered with bandages up his first finger joints. He also wore a new addition to his outfit, grayish scarf covering his all neck and going up to cover his lower face. He had a small forming yellow and blue bruised next to his right eyes, and a cut on the cheek on the same side. Akiko sighed. No need to ask Kay anything, he would not answer. She walked up to him and without saying anything, sat herself next to his feet. The ground was pretty cold, but she would not care. She was a shinobi. And shinobi never complained about anything. Shinobi do their job silently, efficiently and never ever complain. She remembered her father saying in his dark, smooth voice. She smiled at the thought of her dear father. He was a shinobi and had tried to back her up when her mother forbidden her to enter in the academy. Tried to only. Because he was not home very often, because of his missions. He was a Junin from the Special Interrogation Mobile Team. He had even trained under the terrible Morino Ibiki. Her thoughts were interrupted when Shuichi entered the clearing, panting, his hands on his bent knees, his back curved like a cat's. His cheeks were red, his eyes were dilated and his messy brown hair were messily falling over his face. He passed a hand thought his head and stretched back to a full standing position. Is he here? Shuichi asked, scanning the clearing for any sign of their sensei. His mind was still foggy, the blood thumbing in his head, and he was not sure he could recognize his teacher even if he was standing right in front of him. No, not yet. And he is late, again. Akiko said, clearly unnerved. Kay looked up from his book. If Shuichi was here, there was no way he could continue reading in silent. The brown-haired genin could not stand silence more than 3 seconds. He sighed and put his book into his back pouch. He pushed himself away from tree trunk and walked up to his friend. Akiko looked at him curiously, asking him why he was doing it while raising from her sitting position. We should prepare for the test. It's not because we cannot see him that the danger is not real. Quote, as soon as Kay pronounced those words, a flight of kunai embedded themselves on the tree trunk where Akiko had been resting her back. At the sound of the thump sound created by the kunai, she violently turned her head back to the tree, eyes wide. She shocked her head from right to left, looking frankly around the clearing searching for any sign of the attackers. She backed away to her teammates, glancing at them behind her shoulder. Kay had his eyes closed, 4 needles in each hands, his left foot a little step ahead, knees slightly bent, his left arm lifted protecting his heart, and the right a little withdrawn. Next to him, his back against Kay's one, Shuichi kunai in hands, mirroring Kay's position, his eyes scanning the surrounding, narrowing at each bushes and trees. Akiko took her place in the triangle, her left shoulder against Kay's right one, the right against Shuichi's left. From the angle, it came from above, surely a tree, Akiko whispered. I think it was a time-set trap. Shuichi said, trying clumsily to explain his thought. Kay opened his eyes, teetling his head to the right, his eyes narrowing slightly, a small smile creeping on his still hidden face. Surely, he answered. Shuichi turned his head abruptly at this reply. That was a first. Kay had never ever recognized Shuichi was right for any matters. He quickly reverted his attention back to his surrounding as he jumped out of the way of a Kaiden Jutsu. 1. Their formation was broken. Shuichi glanced back at his teammates. Akiko was standing on his right, unscaled. She had her eyes fixed on a tree a few feet away. Small, nearly invisible threads attached to her fingers. She closed slightly her fingertips, pulling her threads like a spider. Soon her kunai were back in her hands. Kay was crouching on his left, his slightly burnt scarf had fallen down showing the lower part of his face. Shuichi's eyes widened, his heart skipping a beat. What on earth had happened to Kay's face? But he had no time to dwell on the horrible purple bruises at the corner of Kei's mouth and his swollen lips, as he was suddenly pulled by the ankles. He quickly reacted, sending a flight of shuriken at the hands gripping his feet. Successfully freeing himself, he jumped backward, landing next to Akiko only to have her tackling him with a kunai. He turned widened eyes at her as she hit him in the stomach and collapsed on his knees, supporting his belly with both hands. He could not avoid the next blow on his side. His vision began to blur and slowly blackness swallow him, but not before he could see the devilish smirk on his assailant face. Weird, he would have swore that Akiko was wearing her dark blue vest today. He blinked, this was not Akiko. Just as he was about to be kicked again, he took out a kunai and aiming it at the head of the false Akiko, threw it, hitting his target dull eye. Then the person posing as Akiko exploded in a puff of grayish smoke. Akiko looked warily around her. She had been separated from the rest of the group and she was now in the forest, a gloomy silent forest at that. She tried to concentrate and not to panic. She was in a bad situation. She was separated from her teammates, in a forest she did not know and attacked by an unknown number of opponents whose positions were also unknown. She sighed. Not a good position at all. She passed her tongue on her dry cold lips, a small puff of white smoke escaping from her mouth. She took out a kunai in her right hand, placing her right hand just above her heart, her forearms protesting her chest. She diverted her gaze to her left hand and tugged the thread attached to her pinky finger. This way, she thought, following the thread. She walked for 10 minutes non-stop. There was no sound. She looked around her, a strong sense of déjà vu hitting her. Her eyes widened. Why had she not seen it sooner? She smiled gracefully, putting her hand in the rat position and concentrated her chakra. Kai, she yelled, and the forest dissolved. Kei took a quick glance at Shuichi. There he was standing on his left, arms in hands. He was about to call him when a sudden kick was aimed at his head. He blocked it with his left forearms, seizing it with both hands. He tried to send his aggressor back into a tree but failed as the second feet hit him directly on the right temple. He flew backwards by the only force of the kick. He tried to stop himself, planted firmly his feet on the ground, but the ground was too slippery and his back hit violently a tree trunk, cutting out his breath. He shocked his head to clear his blurry vision. He just had the time to cross his arms in front of his face to protect from the flight of punches and kicks. Quickly Kei became frustrated. He had lived this situation so often before, him being showered of blows doing nothing but taking them. No, he would not take it anymore. He had to fight back. He grasped his attacker's fist and twisted it. His hands still firmly closed around the fist. He sent his left legs up, attempted to kick his opponent's ribs. But his feet only met with air. Suddenly a cry was heard. Little Rasqual. Quote, the three rapidly reformed their triangle, weapons in hands, eyes darting everywhere warily. They heard a small explosion coming from the center of their formation and quickly broking it, spinning around, they stepped away. Eyes narrowed at the grayish cloud of smoke. The smoke slowly dissolved, the blurry outline of a person could be seen. You. The loud menacing voice added, past. Quote, they watched eyes wide as the person that had presented himself as their teacher the day before, stepped out of the smoke's cloud. Past? Akiko asked, unsure. That was a test? Quote, yep. And you react pretty well, for children, Naruto stated. Hey, you're not that much older than us. Akiko cried out. Anyway, I want to see you here tomorrow at 0700. You're dismissed, Naruto said, puffing away. A last thought crossed his mind before he disappeared, like a lingering feeling that he forgot to say them something important. Bah, whatever, it can wait until tomorrow. Time break. Naruto walked through the door of the Hokage Tower and up to the mission assigning area. Hi Iruka-sensei, how are you? Naruto asked cheerfully, walking up to his old sensei who was sitting behind at Choji's side. Fine, and you? The brown-haired man asked. Fine. Hey Choji. Quote, Naruto got out a brown file and handed it over Choji. They passed. Pretty good teamworks for first-timers, Naruto said with his fox grin neatly in place. Better than yours, Iruka answered with a wink. Naruto pouted for a second before sticking out his tongue at Iruka. So now you have your very own genin team? A voice asked. Naruto turned around to find himself faced with the Junin vest of his own old Junin sensei. He looked up and pouted. No. Naruto whined. Why can't you shrink a little, Kakashi-sensei? Quote, why can't you grow a little, Na-chan? Kakashi stated, a smile forming on his lips, barely noticeable under his mask. Naruto's lips pursed, glaring daggers at Kakashi. Kakashi winked his single eye in a happy rainbow at Naruto, before turning to Choji. They failed, he said, clearly bored as he threw his own brownish file at Choji. Choji's lips stretches on what looked like a mix between a smile and a pout. Ah! Choji sighed, eyeing sadly the file before taking it and classing it. Time break. Sasuke turned his head to the right as the door opened. He recognized the black-haired woman maintaining the door opened. Then the Hokage entered, robe blowing behind her. She had a dark expression on her young-looking face. Her eyes were glaring daggers at the immobilized Uchiha. She stepped on the left and let appear two old persons, a man and a woman. He recognized them as Mitokado Hamaru and Utatane Kaharu, the two teammates of the departed Sandaime Hokage, and the members of the Elder Council. Following them was the 12 Shinobi Council members, the Hyuga, the Nara, the Akamichi, the Yamanaka, the Inuzuka, the Aburame, the Shiranui, the Sarutobi, the Morino, the Kamizuki, the Ketsuko and the Yamashiro. The atmosphere was oppressive. The Hokage had her amber eyes fixed on him as if she wanted to skin him alive. The Elder Council watched him with greed, a small cunning light sparkling in the old woman's eyes. As for the Shinobi Council, most of them seemed to want nothing but see his head on a pick. Uchiha Sasuke. The old man began as if he could not believe his eyes. Why would you come back? The Inuzuka's head interrupted rudely. Sasuke looked at her warily. What could he answer? He could not tell them the truth. But if he lied and they ever suspected that he lied, his lifespan would be considerably shortened. He bit his lips slightly and took a deep breath. But before he could say anything, someone interrupted him. I gathered that you came back successfully from that secret mission Sarutobi-sama had assigned you before his death? Kaharu said in her old grinding voice. Sasuke narrowed his eyes slightly at her. Secret mission? Hyuga Hiashi wondered out loud. Yes. Secret mission. Homura confirmed eagerly. Sarutobi had given a spying mission to the Uchiha heir. Hotaru continued. His mission was to infiltrate the Sound. Quote, I did not see any report or mission file speaking of this. Tsunade huffed, suspecting the old couple of lying to save their precious Uchiha. It's a well-known fact that Sarutobi was never one to be very organized. He hardly finished his paperwork on his good days, Hotaru remarked, looking sharply at the current Hokage. Plus it was decided during the Chunin exam, Kaharu added. Why would Sandaime-sama would have sent a genin in such a high-risks mission? And without backup? Narashika asked matter-of-factly. Because he had received the curse seal from Orochimaru during the Chunin exam. Kaharu answered pointingly. I read a report from Anko about that. Morino Ibiki interjected. But that does not clear the fact. Why would he have attacked the rescue team? The Ketsuko's head remarked. And why were we not aware of those facts? Hiashi added, glaring daggers at the two elders. It was a well-known fact that the Hyuga's head hated the Elder Council. He found them a little too authoritative for his taste. They had several times made decisions about military matters that were not there to take and had cost precious shinobi and civilians' lives. They were the one who had opposed the promotion of the young Uzumaki Naruto to the rank of Chunin 3 years ago, even thought they should have had no say in those matters. But what had really put Hiashi on the edge had been when the Elder Council tried to pry in the Hyuga's private matters, asking that the heir was chosen and that the remaining one was given out in marriage to the Cloud. That day Hiashi had nearly blew the council's meeting room. After hours of heated debate, the Elder Council had managed to obtain the reluctant votes of 3/4 of the shinobi councilors, and to his great sadness, Hiashi had to choose and he lost his daughter Hanabi to the Cloud. Sasuke looked at the scene unfolding in front of him. There was his chance to get out of this mess unscathed and to be able to be trained again so he could face Itachi. Itachi, the name awakened the powerful feeling of hatred inside Sasuke's frame. He breathed in, licking his dry lips. Sandaime-sama was afraid that spies remained in Konoha and preferred this mission to remain an absolute secret even from the Shinobi Council. But he needed witnesses just in case he would be incapacitated before the end of my mission. So he decided that the elder council members, his ex-teammates, would be our witnesses. Sasuke lied through his teeth. Sasuke turned his eyes to the Hokage, a small smirk forming on his lips. I must thank Godem-sama. Her idea to send a rescue team after me permitted me to enter more easily inside the sound. No one would suspected me to be a Konoha spy after I had nearly killed my own best friend and teammate, Sasuke added. Tsunade glared at the Uchiha. This was lies. All lies. Sarutobi would have never made such a reckless move. She looked around her at the 12 shinobi counselors. None seems convinced by the Uchiha's poor explanations. But it seemed that none would object. She sighed. No, no one could object. Because it would mean suggesting that the elders were traitors, thus upsetting the fragile scales of powers. That could lead to a myriad of possibilities, and riots and internal wars were the most probable ones. Tsunade bit her lower lip. This was a very dangerous position. She would have to do something about the Elder Council. Soon, very soon. At least she could fulfill her promise to Naruto. Time break. Tsunade sat at her desk fuming. She had to make an announcement. One she really did not want to do. She had to re-establish the Uchiha in his functions as a Konoha shinobi and give him the Junin title. She could not believe it. Naruto had to go through a test, and this little mongrel could just be given the Junin title because he accomplished a simple SS rank mission? No test would be practiced to see the Uchiha real level, nothing at all. As the elders put it, he had been trained by one of the powerful Sannin of Konoha. Tsunade gritted her teeth. And what about Naruto? Had he not been trained by a Sannin and performed loads of difficult S and SS ranked missions during his training? Plus his file was clear of all suspicious of treachery. But he had to go through a stupid skill test. Tsunade violently punched the wall, creating an enormous crater in the concrete wall and a small earthquake. Immediately, 2 Anbu burst into her office, looking for any assailant. She looked up at them, glaring. She was clearly displaying her anger on her feature. The 2 Anbu gulped, silently praying to themselves that Tsunade would not pass her anger on them. I want you to gather the heads of the Anbu squad, the special Junin, the head of the strategy department, of the medic Nin, of the hunter Nin, Uruka, and the head of the root. Danzo-sama immediately, she barked. A few minutes later, 14 persons were standing waiting, impatient to know what their Hokage wanted to speak about. Tsunade looked at them, only one was missing. She sighed loudly in discontentment. Where is that old coat? She thought to herself. Suddenly the door opened. An old man around his 70s, walked in wrapped in a brown and gray kimono, his left arms in a sling, his hand loosely hanging down. His face had been severely marked by times and battles, and his left eye was covered by a white bandages, too. He walked up to one of the armchair and promptly sat in it, not glancing at the other in the room. He looked straight in the Hokage eyes, putting his chin up, his lips set in a grim line as if saying that it would better to be for a good reason that she disturbed him. Tsunade cleared her throat, clearly displeased by Danzo's theatrical entrance. I've called you to make an important announcement. 3 days ago, Uchiha Sasuke had been found wounded at the North Gate by Uzumaki Naruto. Quote, she looked up to see Uruka and Kakashi glanced at her worriedly. For security reasons, he had been transported to my special medical wards in the Hokage Towers. She continued, glancing at her medic colleague, who simply nodded in understanding. Later on, it had been brought up that the Uchiha was in fact a spy for Konoha returning from his mission. Under those circumstances, Uchiha Sasuke has been reinstated and given the title of Junin. Quote, Tsunade narrowed her eyes as she saw some of the Junin ready to object. His name will be taken off the missing nin list at once. This decision had been taken with the consent of the majority of both council and shall not be discussed further. You're dismissed, she said, cutting out any possible objections. The all group of ninja nodded and puffed away. Apart from Danzo, who stayed in his armchair, looking curiously at the Hokage, his unique eyes sparkling cunningly. Hokage-sama. He began, mockingly polite. The Uchiha records, before this little mission, were impressive. I'm sure he had made great progress. Quote, Tsunade glared warily at the old man sitting in front of her, not really knowing what he wanted. Did he wanted to criticize her lack of action in the matter, or? Gods forbade this. She would absolutely not accept. She gritted her teeth, waiting for the old coat to continue. I would like the Uchiha to enter the route. Danzo finally ordered, more than requested. Tsunade tried not to laugh. Never, she answered, and that's final. Quote. Danzo glared at her, he was about to add something when she cut him. Don't count on the Elder Council, they are far too greedy. I just have to choose wisely my words and they will side with me. Just suggesting that putting the Uchiha in the root would be dangerous and may incapacitate him to ever had any relationship with girls and they will immediately put their veto on the decision, she said smugly. Danzo gritted his teeth, his jaw stiffened, knowing perfectly well that the Elder Council was easily corrupted by power and greed. After all, he had already bribed them more than once so they would turn blind eyes to some of his illegal activities. He slowly got up, bowing slightly in mock politeness and took his leave not looking back. Tsunade smiled at her small victory. She turned her sharp eyes to a corner of the room. Kakashi, she called. The Junin immediately stepped out of the shadow, his gray eye fixed on the Hokage. A spying mission? To a genin? Kakashi asked incredulously. And they actually managed to convince the Shinobi Council with such a lame excuse? Quote. No, they did not. But neither the clan's head nor me had proofs of their lies, Tsunade answered. Time break. Sakura skipped happily to the Yamanaka flower shop, whistling some joyful tune. Sakura was happy, extremely happy. Sasuke had came back to her finally. And Naruto was here too. She smiled as she opened the door of the tiny shop to see Ino arranging flowers in the back. Arashimasu, 3. Ino said dutifully, weeping her hands on her green apron while walking up to the counter. Ino, Sakura cried enthusiastically. You know what? You know what? Quote. Ino looked up at her friend, her light blue eyes shining with curiosity. Knowing what? She asked with a mischievous smile. Sasuke is back, Sakura yelled, throwing her arms carelessly around her. I already know, Ino said calmly, a tad disappointed. Sakura looked eyes wide at her friend. You know? Sakura asked incredulously, since when? Why didn't you tell me? Quote. Sakura narrowed her green eyes at her friend. You wanted to keep Sasuke-kun for yourself, didn't you? Sakura asked accusingly. Ino rose one of her elegant light blonde eyebrow. No, not at all. You know I have Choji now. Quote. But, it's an arranged. Sakura tried to protest. Yes, it is. But that does not change the fact that I learned to appreciate Choji. I may not love him yet, but that better than running after false hopes, Ino cut. Never mind, that means you leave Sasuke to me? Sakura asked with a smirk. And what about Lee? You should not worry so much about Sasuke. Didn't he reject you already? Ino asked seriously, getting annoyed by Sakura's behavior. He knew he was going to go on a suicide mission. Sakura protested loudly. He did not want me to get hurt if he had to. Sakura said, nibbling her lower lip. What the hell are you talking about? Ino said, watching eyes wide as her friend. Don't you love Lee? Quote. Sakura looked away from the insistent stare of her friend. Anyway, she began. Can I have 12 dandelions please? Quote. Ino glared at her friend, knowing perfectly well for who she was buying the flowers. Ino carefully picked up the flowers. The dandelions were from her family bedseed. Her mother had nursed them so they would bloom even in the still fresh weather of the end of March. There, Ino said, wrapping the flowers in a yellow and green plastic, attached them with a green, orange and yellow colored raffia. Sakura carefully lifted the bouquet. Thanks Ino, she said, putting bills on the counter. Ino watched as her friend walked out of the shop, a sad smile on her lips. She knew that Sakura had never gotten over her crush on Sasuke. And the second her father entered the shop telling her about the Uchiha return, she knew that Sakura would come rushing here and make the biggest mistake of her life. Ino sighed. She picked up the phone and dialed her boyfriend number. Choji, prepared yourself for a wailing Lee. Sasuke is back, she simply said before hanging up. The bell of the shop rang and Ino placed her commercial smile neatly on her face. Arashimasu. Quote. Uchiha Sasuke was laying on his hospital bed, staring at his hands. No matter how he looked at it, he still had only 9 fingers. He gritted his teeth as he saw his doctor, a small squat man in his late 40s early 50s with grayish greasy hair scotching at his skull, entered the room noisily, stumbling over his own feet. Following him was a young inexperienced-looking nurse whose head was bowed so low that Sasuke could only see a glimpse of her pale face through her messy dark brown hair. He walked up to Sasuke's bed, licking his bulldog-like lips then wiping his red potato-like nose with his horrid dark red handkerchief. He gripped the file hanging on the bed foot and opened it, the metallic jacket clinking loudly against the iron rod of the bed. "So Uchimi-san, 1. The doctor began while seemingly reading the file, narrowing his piggy black eyes at the small scribed words neatly arranged on the white paper. "It's, Sasuke said, frowning his nose in disgust as the smell his doctor wine-stained breath entered his nostrils. "Yeah, Uchiki, too," the doctor repeated as he put the file back in place. "I submit your case to a surgeon. He sadly came to the same conclusion as me. It's inoperable. Even though whoever gave you the first aids was quite skilled, it's a miracle that you can even stand. You may be able to walk, but do not strain your ankle too much. It will not resist to shock and it is really weakened. But as I know the like of you never follow advices. So I warned you Uchiki, 3, any tremendous effort on this ankle and you will be limping for the rest of your life." The doctor looked up at the Uchiha glaring, then took Sasuke's left hand, taking off the bandages. He examined it, particularly the empty space where should have been the ring finger. The finger was gangrened, we had to cut it to its base. His doctor said in a businesslike voice. "Your body is obviously too weak to undergo a reconstructive surgery." He stopped frowning deeply, passing his rough fingertip over the tender reddish skin which had grown over the injury. "The stump does not heal quickly enough," the doctor whispered to himself, releasing Sasuke's hand. "So what?" Sasuke snapped back, clearly unnerved. His black eyes narrowed at the doctor standing in front of him. "There is next to no hope that you will be able to have a prosthesis for your finger," the doctor said, ignoring the glare thrown at him by the youngest Uchiha. Sasuke bit the inside of his cheek. "But," the man began. Sasuke tilted his head slightly to the right, showing his doctor that he had his full attention. "If you don't exert yourself too much, it could be possible. It's a slim chance. But you would have to stop using chakra even for the simplest things for about a year. And then the chakra coils may be damaged during the surgery, incapacitating you to ever use them again." "No prosthesis," Sasuke said firmly. The up until then silent nurse turned around, looking eyes wide at the Uchiha, letting out a shrill, "Uchiha-san, you've to reconsider," she pleaded adamantly, looking fervently at the Uchiha. "There is nothing to reconsider." Sasuke spatted back at the nurse, who cowered back, biting down her thin light pink lip. Her brownish eyes immediately turning down, she licked her lips and sniffled. Her eyes landed on Sasuke's missing left ring finger and she felt her determination harden. She took a step towards Sasuke's bed. "I must insist, Uchiha-san, it's very important." She trailed, not having a clue of what she could say to convince the Uchiha to undergo the surgery. Her eyes met the dark gaze of the Uchiha and she shrunk back, fearing the undertone threat hidden in those dark pools. "When can I be discharged?" the Uchiha asked arrogantly, turning away from the cowering nurse. Naruto sighed. He hated D-ranked mission. He hated them when he was a genin, and he hated them even more now that he was a Junin sensei. The sound of the walkie-talkie called Naruto back to reality. "Red leaf in place. Target in view." At 3.00, came the barely audible adolescent voice of K. Another static sound and the loud yet effeminate voice of Shuichi echoed into Naruto's ears. "Green leaf in place. Target in view." At 6.00. In place. Target 9.00. Naruto rolled his eyes at Akiko's total disinterest in the procedure. "Capture the target," Naruto whispered inside the receptor. Naruto heard scrapping of the leaves, the screeching of a cat and the cry of anger and pain of Shuichi. A small smile formed on Naruto's face as he remembered his own D-ranked mission. Target caught, K voiced without any emotion. Naruto silently get down the tree branch he had been crouching on, making his way to his now bickering team. Sasuke had managed to get his useless doctor to discharge him. Sadly, in his way out, he met face to face with Sakura. Apparently she had been looking for him all around the hospital. Sasuke could see she had not changed much apart from looking a bit more muscular than he remembered. She was still nuisance, following him around like lost puppy. Sasuke wondered briefly if she was still a ninja. It certainly did not look like she had trained a lot. Maybe she had become a medic. She could not hope better with her evident lack of chakra. "I heard Naruto found you." That was all Sasuke caught of Sakura babbling. Naruto had found him? Sasuke looked down at his hands and flexed his leg. That was the Dobi who gave him the first aids. It was the Dobi who saved his right leg. Sasuke stopped for a second. Could Naruto still consider him as a friend? Sasuke felt strangely relief at the thought. He quickly shook his head. No, he did not need friends. Friends were like weight wrapped around his legs, keeping him from reaching his goal. Sasuke frowned a bit. Maybe he could make use of Naruto. Not killing him, of course. He got out of an attempt of murder on a fellow ninja once, he would certainly not get out of it a second time. Better not tempt fate. But if Sasuke had learned one thing from Orochimaru, it was that killing someone was not necessarily a physical feat. One could kill the spirit too. It was more efficient. Just one word, an action, in the world would go blank to the victim. Like that he could obtain the Mangekyo and without killing Naruto per se. I'll be watching over you. Sakura beamed at Sasuke, attaching herself to his arm. Order from Tsunade-sama. Naruto was soaking wet. How stupid could he be sometimes? He knew it was going to rain. It was written all over the sky. But no, he did not listen to his instinct and left his umbrella home. He knew running under the rain was useless. It would not prevent him from being soaking wet, so he walked cursing his own stupidity. Mud was accumulating quickly under the soles of his boots, making them heavier. He pouted, he was so tired. He just wanted to go home. The light of the street above him flickered once, twice, thrice before tuning out of existence. Naruto let out a sigh. It was just his luck. He took a quick look up at the sky, wondering if he could hope for a slight rest from the rain. No, certainly not. It would surely rain all night long and maybe even all day tomorrow from the look of the sky, which was quite exceptional for the fire country. Naruto bit his lips. He had the feeling that something bad would happen. He turned his eyes back to the road and quickened his pace. He would take a long bath once at home and then go check on his little genin just to make sure. He hurried his pace a little and arrived in record time for a walking pace to his apartment. Of course, he was soaked to the bone, but that would be a matter quickly taken care of. Pushing his door open, he quickly shaved his wet clothes, not caring that he was sprawling around his flat naked as the day he was born. He quickly made it to the bathroom, hoping he would not have to mop too much of the floor after. He turned on the shower, waiting for the hot water. Damn, why does it take so long? Naruto thought, jumping from one foot to another in hope to warm himself up a bit. The water turned warm, creating a thick foam, and Naruto just dived under the spray, closing his eyes and enjoying the feeling of the hot water rushing on him, burning his cold flesh back to a warmer state. He let out a smile. He would stay under the warm spray all his life if he could, but his hyperactive side would not let him be there for more than a few minutes actually. Naruto frowned a bit. He could swear he heard some noises coming from the front door. Leaving the faucets on, he stepped out of the shower cubicle, grasped a towel and knotted it around his waist. He silently looked for the kunai he hid behind the pharmacy drawer, and made his way out of the bathroom. He suppressed a shiver as the cold air of the hall struck him. His legs felt numb. He should not have taken such a hot shower, he scolded himself as he made his way as silently as he could toward the entryway. There stood the intruder, not even trying to conceal himself. Naruto frowned. Sasuke? He asked. What are you doing out of the hospital? Naruto, was the only reply he got. Yeah, I'm Naruto. Naruto answered, flicking the light on. You know you could knock before entering someone else's home. I heard it was the polite thing to do, you know. There was a silence for a moment, Naruto waiting for Sasuke to reply. You're even less talkative than before. Naruto complained, a bit uneasy. But Sasuke stood still, not replying, not moving, not even the slightest sign of emotion crossing his face. And it crept Naruto out. Won't you come inside? Naruto proposed. I'll make you some green tea and onigiri, for. Still like those, no? Naruto stepped aside, gesturing for Sasuke to enter. I'm going to put some clothes on. Make yourself home, Naruto explained as he made his way back to the bathroom. When he was back, he found Sasuke sitting on his couch, a cup of steaming tea in his hands. Naruto's eyes fell on Sasuke's missing finger. Will they be able to do anything about? Naruto asked. It was bad when I first saw it. I tried to help a bit, but it did not seem like it was salvageable. Sasuke stayed silent, puffing on his hot tea. Anyway, I'm glad you're back, Sasuke. Naruto let out in a whisper. He waited for a moment to see if Sasuke would react. I know it's not what you wanted. I mean being back here. You surely never planned to come back. You would have killed your brother and disappeared like the hero do at the end of a story. Naruto babbled. He looked at Sasuke, who was now sipping his tea in silence. I guess I'm really happy to see you back. Naruto repeated, hoping for an answer. He stared at Sasuke for a long time. Arg, this is so sappy. Naruto exclaimed, trying to break the building tension. You've always been sappy, Sasuke replied under his breath. Naruto smiled. He finally got a word out of Sasuke. Hey, me sappy? Certainly not, Naruto claimed. You're, Sasuke insisted. Am not. Naruto tried to instigate one of the old "are versus are not" war he used to have with Sasuke. Sasuke stared at him. You know we are long past the age of those childish games. Sasuke said in a calm, even voice. We may, but that doesn't mean we can't be childish from time to time. It's no good to always be serious, Sasuke. Naruto complained. Naruto stared at the low table in silence for a few seconds. I few times to enjoy myself as I used to. Reality really hit me hard, you know, Sasuke. Naruto explained in a serious voice. Naruto looked directly into Sasuke's eyes. I know what you are planning to do, Sasuke. Naruto whispered. His eyes never left Sasuke as Sasuke went rigid. I know you want to break me to obtain the Mangekyo. Naruto continued, eyes glued on Sasuke, analyzing the slightest flinch. Naruto took his own cup of tea that Sasuke had prepared for him, in his hand. It would be so easy for you to break me, Sasuke. Naruto confessed. I'm on the verge of breaking the slightest push, and all that is me will implode in millions of little pieces. I know it. I can feel it. Naruto took a sip of his tea, his eyes still fixed on Sasuke. But I don't think it would be worth. Naruto supplied. For you to break me. You never went for the easiest way, Sasuke. Even going to Orochimaru was not choosing the easy way. Naruto frowned a second, thinking of what he wanted to say. Orochimaru had high expectation for you, and he was not going to cuddle you like Konoha had done. Naruto snorted. From the beginning they were cuddling you. In academy, they pulled out the subject of missing nin classification in our year. The team choice. The softest, most vulnerable kunoichi and the demon. There was no way we would have been chosen for any really dangerous missions. The instructor. One of the toughest special Junin with Enbu background and a very good understanding of the Sharingan. Naruto gulped down his tea. It took me ages to figure that out, you know. Naruto explained sadly. He turned his gaze back to Sasuke. It had never been a question of balance. The one with the worst result, with the one with the best overall, and the one with the best written knowledge. That was all bullshit, Naruto complained. I looked it up in the library. Naruto blinked as he saw the beginning of a smirk formed on Sasuke's lips. Yeah, I know my punk self in a library is very unlikely. That's why I used a henge. My reputation of inept idiot is still whole. Naruto joked. Naruto chuckled a bit to himself before falling silent again. No team had ever been formed following our scheme before. Not even the Sannin, in opposition to what Jiraiya and Tsunade told me. Naruto turned around, back now facing Sasuke as he began to pace back and fro. Jiraiya had the best hand-to-hand fighting abilities, Orochimaru was the best at jutsu theory and practice, and Tsunade tied with Jiraiya in taijutsu and had the best result in strategy. Naruto explained. Naruto let out a smirk as he saw the information sank in. You've been manipulated, Sasuke concluded. Played like a puppet. Naruto nodded, turning around to face Sasuke. Sasuke looked up at Naruto, a bit confused at Naruto's rather amused reaction. But the puppet is just hanging by threads, and once the puppet realized it had been played, it can easily cut the threads. Naruto explained. But does the puppet want to cut the threads? No, it does not. Sasuke answered. Because without them, it would have to make its own decisions. You see, Sasuke, I'm a willing prisoner, too afraid of freedom to break myself free. Naruto explained. Naruto turned around, now facing Sasuke. It would be pretty useless to break me. When I broke myself, Sasuke. Naruto concluded. I'm just a sad shadow of what was once the me they fashioned. Sasuke raised from his sitting position, putting the cup back on the low table. It was nice talking to you, Sasuke. I hope to be able to do it again soon. Naruto muttered, but Sasuke was already gone. Naruto forced a smile on his face. One more day. Sakura was frantic. She looked one last time around the pretty large studio. under the bed against the far wall on her left, under the other bed near the door, just in case in the attached bathroom looking through the small window, the only window of the flat, and in the American kitchen. But Sasuke was nowhere to be seen. She had just closed her eyes for a minute, and next thing she knew Sasuke had disappeared. She had begged and begged Tsunade-sama to be the one looking after Sasuke, and now she had lost him. Tsunade-sama would never trust her with something important again if she ever heard of it. She had wanted to become someone, and she had worked her best to enter under the tutelage of the best kunoichi the ninja world had ever produced. Day after day, for the last 3 years, she had revived smelly dead fishes, sutured thousands of pigs' legs until she could do it her eyes closed. She even asked that psycho of Anko to help her learn about the human body after Tsunade told her that book knowledge would never be enough. Despite her progress, she had yet to become someone of her own. She was still just the apprentice of. But she had faith that with a bit more training, all her dreams would be dashed in the ground if she lost her mentor's trust over that small insignificant mistake. She had just needed to close her eyes. She had been so tired with all the thoughts going in her head: Lee, Sasuke, Naruto, her mom. Lee, all those things kept adding up. And she just closed her eyes for a second. She could not stay there standing like an idiot lamenting and making excuses. What she needed to do now was to find Sasuke. She took a deep breath. Where would she go if she was Sasuke? She prided herself in knowing Sasuke the best, and he could not have changed all that much in a few years' time they had been apart. The Uchiha compound? It had been teared down, and the Maze of Names memorial dedicated to ninja fallen in the line of duty had been built in its stead. It was more a civilian attraction than a ninja's, and no ninja visited it like they had once visited the training ground memorial stone. The training grounds? Yes, but which one? There were so many of them. Maybe their training ground, the one they used past the bell test and the one they used to train in, the memorial stone training ground. But it was not a training ground anymore. The Elder Council and the Ninja Council were in a tugging war over it. The ninja wanted to keep their memorial, but the elders argued that now that they had the Maze of Name, thus they did not need the memorial stone anymore, and that it would be better to rehabilitate that training ground into a commercial zone to fit Konoha ever-growing commercial attractiveness. As a result, their training ground was little more than a wild field now. Sakura sighed. Even if Sasuke had no changed after all those years, Konoha did. And Sakura was at a loss at where to look for Sasuke. Maybe at Naruto's? She stopped for a second. They had never really been good friend, and Sakura was pretty sure that Sasuke only put up with Naruto because active genin team had to be 3 members team. There was no friendship between them, or it was rather one-sided on Naruto's side. Proof was from what she had understood. Sasuke had tried to kill Naruto. Without her, they would not meet. She would be the one thanks to who they would become friends. For her sake, they would do it. Not on their own. Never on their own. They would not left her behind again. Doing things behind her back. Taking decision. Learning things about each other, things Sakura did not know, would not know, never. Sakura slowly began to panic. Putting on her shoes, she stormed out of the apartment, not even caring that she left it wide open. She had to make sure. She ran up through the street, ignoring the fact that she had gone out without any umbrella and that it was now pouring cats and dogs. She ran blindly, anger and anxiety rising in her. They would not leave her out anymore. She would not be left on the side to wake up in the morning and find them both gone. No way. She would not be left behind anymore. Never again. Just as she arrived to Naruto's apartment building, she saw a shadow slipping away from it, and decided to follow it. She narrowed her eyes. She could make out blonde hair. It was Naruto. Maybe he was going to Sasuke. She had to follow him. Sakura cursed herself for not training more, as Naruto was clearly distancing her and she was feeling the weight of her wet clothes as she tried to run after him. But she had good eyes, and even in the dark, she would be able to pinpoint him running from roof to roof. Naruto crept silently up to the window. He could have swear he heard the sound of glass breaking on the floor. He knew if something was to go wrong it would be with Kei. He had seen the bruises and the slight, barely repressed yelp of fear when someone came near him without his knowledge. Choji, himself, had told him that something was fishy with the woman. She doesn't act like she cares for him. It's like all this is a punishment she has to go through. Choji had explained. Naruto had frowned at the word Choji had used. A punishment. Not an obligation, not a board, not a torture, a punishment. This had worried Naruto more than he would have cared to. Naruto silently entered the house through Kei's opened window. He took a look around. The walls were covered with books of all kinds. From the tree encyclopedia to the forging technicalities, from Wagahai ha Neko Diru, 5, to the Treaty of the Five Wheels. Naruto had to say he was slightly impressed by the diversity of subjects Kei had covered at such a young age. Naruto walked up to the door carefully, avoiding the numerous traps hidden in the room. Someone liked his privacy, it seemed. Naruto smiled a bit at the cleverness of some of the setup. If given the occasion, Kei would do one hell of a prankster. Naruto would make sure to give you the perfect setting. A smile would be a nice change to see on the boy's face. Naruto slowly slipped the door of the room open. There was light in the hall and screams coming from the living room. "You're my punishment," a woman was yelling. "I failed him and you're my punishment. He gave you to me to punish me for my failure, I know it. Why can't you just disappeared? When will I have redeemed myself to his eyes? When will he come to ride me of you? When will I have paid enough? 11 years, is that a long enough punishment? He won't come see me anymore because you're here. My punishment." Naruto crept closer, worried about his student. Each sentences of the incoherent speech had been punctuated by muffled sounds which suspiciously sounded like hit falling on a body. "I know, that's what he wants. He won't be happy with me, but I'll end my punishment. I know the way." The deluded woman screamed just as Naruto entered the room. Naruto took a second to take in the situation. There, in the middle of what should have been a living room but looked more like a battlefield. Lamps broken down, low table overthrown, couches cushions teared up. There stood a disheveled woman in a floral-themed dress teared at places, blood staining her not-so-white anymore apron. Her hair were undone. Eyes wide and crazed, hands clutching tightly, a knife ready to strike. At her feet, crouched into a fetal position, covered in bruises, was a whimpering Kei. What shocked Naruto was that Kei was not making any move to avoid the hits, nor was he begging, or calling for his mother in hope to get her out of that trance she seemed to be in. He had, sadly, witnessed this kind of scene before with Jiraiya. Jiraiya had this kind of sixth sense to find the house in which problems were brewing. And Naruto never came out unscathed from those visits. For each time he walked on one of those kind of scene, he bore a scar, a deep scar that not even time would erase. The horror of the world, Jiraiya called it. And sometimes, Naruto wished he had never seen it. But like it had been drilled into his mind by Jiraiya, Naruto acted. He took the knife out of the woman's hands, cutting his palms open. It is often all it takes to shake a delusional person out of their trance. Seeing another person hurt by their action, furthermore if that person is a stranger. Naruto then proceeded in throwing the weapon away. Taking the woman's face in his hands, he looked at her intently. If the fact of hurting someone else does not wake them up, then a call back to reality is necessary. Touching them is the first step. If this fails, a slap should definitely wake them up. Naruto had followed Jiraiya's method step by step. But he really did not want to hit the woman. He had a feeling that whatever he would do, it would be a waste. The woman had been far too gone and for far too long for Naruto to be able to do anything about it. "What are you doing in my house?" the woman asked in a whisper. "Did he send you to get rid of my punishment?" Naruto winced at the obvious excitement in her voice. If all failed and the necessity arose, in order to secure the victim, you can play along their disillusion. But never forget. Don't ever turn your back to them. That's it, Naruto answered, hoping that it would appeased her if not pleased her a little. "He sent me to take away your punishment." He slowly turned away from her. He knew that was a dangerous move, but, from what he had seen, Kei needed immediate medical care. Naruto could feel her moving around, going for the knife without the shadow of a doubt. But Kei's health statue was more important than protecting himself from the crazed woman. Kei had some nasty bruises, several broken bones, and surely some heavy internal bleeding. Naruto pushed his chakra inside Kei, trying to ignore the pain groaned his student emitted. Now he could feel the woman stalking to him. Surely the knife was in her hands, ready to strike. But he did not care if she stabbed him. He could take it with his host making its best to keep him alive. At last, they had got rid of it. The demon who was tainting their village was gone. The village would flourish again without the shadow of this dark past looming over it. It was all for the better. And people would see it their way. Ninja, too, would see the light in their decision. Of course, the boy they had to use had been a part of Konoha Ninja Force and it may create some problem with them overstepping their boundaries. But all had been done for the greater good of Konoha. And, if the boy survived, he would be proud of having part in the betterment of the village. And if he did not survive, they would make sure his name was revered accordingly to the great sacrifice he had made and put in good place on the maze of name, next to the names of the greatest heroes of Konoha. They had not wait for the interrogation and torture department's report. Whatever the report might said would not change the end result. The demon was gone and would not stain Konoha with its presence anymore. After all those years, they had finally managed it. And no one would be able to do anything about it. And to that, they cheered all night long until the first light of day. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.